Hey, Lisa.
Hi there, Emily.
Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Today we have Lisa Bedford, author of Survival Mom, available on Amazon. And she is here today for the COVID Summit to talk to us about surviving what we're surviving right now. We're all survivors right now, but you've been preparing for this type of situation for a long time on your website, thesurvivalmom.com, where you've helped people prepare for situations so they're ready for anything. So we're not all preppers, a new word I learned. You can maybe tell us what that means in a second. And so we're not all prepared for this, but we can be, and we can start right now. So thank you for being with us. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how did you get involved
Yeah,
in, how did you become the survival mom?
I know.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, Emily, but when I first started noticing how unprepared my family was,
Hmm.
it was about 11 years ago. And I think probably some of your viewers will remember the years of kind of starting in 2008 and then going into
Hmm.
2009 and 2010. And the economy was just in a free fall. It
Right.
happened just that we were living in Phoenix at the time that was particularly hit hard by the
Mm-hmm.
construction industry just being devastated. And my husband, as luck would have it, had a company in that industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to notice that not only could businesses didn't have, our business didn't slow down, our business stopped. No
Right.
phone calls. And it was, all of a sudden it was a wake up call. And
Yeah.
I began to research, what if our house went into foreclosure? What if our business shut down and we had no income?
Sure.
And as I began to research, I learned about, hey, I can stock up on food, and we would at least have that as kind of as a fail safe, And I could do other things like for different kinds of emergencies. And
Mm-hmm.
before I knew it, I had started the blog, thesurvivalmom.com, and had never been a blogger, knew nothing about blogging at all.
Hmm.
But I was unaware that the timing was really good. And before I
Right.
knew it, different prepping or preppers websites had picked up my articles and I began to get more traffic. But I never really thought of myself as a prepper. Oh, we're
Hmm.
preppers. My mother goes around telling her friends, oh, my daughter is a prepper. But I always just honestly thought of myself as a smart mom, a smart woman.
Sure.
And my husband was fully on board. So we just began to do some common sense things as we could and as we could afford it.
Mm-hmm.
So before long, I had, a few weeks of extra groceries in a spare bedroom. And whenever I saw things on sale and with coupons, instead of just buying one tube of toothpaste, I might buy three or four or five and
Right.
just set those aside. I learned pretty quickly what it really meant to be a prepper. Don't really know where that term came from, but it was always, what can I do for my family in our budget and in our circumstances that would help us sustain one type of emergency or another.
Hmm.
And now that we live in hurricane country, that has taken on a new meaning because
Hmm.
our town was horribly flooded during Hurricane Harvey, and we've had some pretty significant floods. We've lived here 6 years. I think we've had floods another four times in addition to Harvey.
Wow. Wow.
So now when I prep, I'm thinking, okay, power outage during a hurricane, maybe possibly needing, to increase our water supply and
Right.
water purification methods. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be something like a worst case scenario, because frankly, this pandemic, you would put in the category of worst case scenarios.
Absolutely.
And it can really be everyday emergencies, Emily, like the loss of a job. That's an
Right.
emergency.
Yeah,
And
sure.
you have an extra month's worth of groceries. Well, that's a month of a margin there that you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be frantic about buying groceries when there is no income. So honestly, it's common sense, and it goes back to the days of our grandmas, our great grandparents, and before them,
Mm-hmm.
when food storage was just an everyday thing. In fact,
Right.
when I'll come across articles, by archaeologists, they have found a stash of food, or they've found a stash of grain or
Mm-hmm.
honey or
Mm-hmm.
olive oil, and just that kind of mentality where we don't assume there will always be plenty.
Well,
And
I
that's
think our
not a scary
ancestors,
place to be.
right, our ancestors too had to get food when they could get it in season
Right.
and then find a way to store it. They didn't have refrigeration or warehouses at off site of their homes. So they had to keep all of that at home and find a way to preserve that throughout the winter and the harder months. So we've
Right.
gotten really complacent maybe with having those conveniences in our home where we only need to store a little bit, or we only have space to store a little bit in our kitchens, and then we don't think about using a spare bedroom or the garage or the basement or a space to keep extras for emergencies.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And space is actually one of the limitations that concern a lot of people. But
Mm-hmm.
here's what's ironic, okay? In every neighborhood we have lived in, I would say at least half the houses, they have to park their vehicles out in the driveway
Sure.
because their garage is so full of crap. And
That's
that
me.
includes us. You know, we
Yeah.
have, like, we have a family of four. I think we have 8 bicycles, full-size
Mm. Right.
bicycles, and we have all the tools and ladders, and
Mm.
it's like, okay, for a long time, and I know that a lot of, kind of more hardcore survival websites and probably the people who wrote for them or owned them, they probably just kind of smirked. But for a long time, I've been telling people one of your first steps in being prepared, honestly, it is to declutter. It is just to get the stuff out.
Yeah. Right.
And right now with this pandemic, if there was someone sick in your household, you would really have to be concerned about disinfecting things.
Yes.
Well, when you live in a home that is not just surrounded, almost like you would be a candidate for the TV show Hoarders, right? Uh, the less there is to clean, the less there would be to disinfect, and just also basic housekeeping becomes so much
Yes.
easier when there is simplicity. And that alone brings just kind of a peace of mind, where I have a cousin who, when she dies, her family will have one heck of a yard sale.
Oh,
I've never
yeah.
seen a house so cluttered.
Right.
And that's not a really good place to be. And it actually wears on our stress levels, just to be surrounded by piles of stuff. So if there's, nowhere else that someone knows where to
Mm-hmm.
start with those drawers, start with the cupboards. You know what to do. You can go on decluttering and organizing websites. There are thousands of them, but that one step alone will free up space.
Mm-hmm.
So as you do start building that
Right.
extra supply of food or toilet paper, now you have a place to put it.
I love that you're bringing this up early in our conversation because, to be honest, when I hear prepper, I think, where do you put that stuff? And I almost have a vision of one of those hoarder households.
Yeah.
But before we started recording, I saw a panorama of your house a little bit, and you have no clutter. Your house is this beautiful open space, and it's not, I didn't see a stitch of clutter in your house.
Oh, thank you.
And so my little idea in my head of what a prepper is blown away, because
That's
you
funny.
can be a prepper and be organized at the same time. Right. So
Yes,
it's not about like just having things everywhere. It's having the right things in the right places.
that, and then, something else. Back in the day, I don't even know, 2009, 10, 11, sometime in that front time frame, Doomsday Preppers was a popular show.
Hmm.
And it did portray something that was kind of unrealistic, Emily. Like, they did show people with just mountains of,
Right.
freeze-dried food and so on. But here's one thing. Yes, you do need to stock up on the food and then the supplies and so on, cleaning supplies and so on. And um, but there's one thing that you can do that is also free and that no one can ever take away, and that is building up your bank of knowledge and skills.
Hmm.
So
Right.
here's something, and I haven't written about it yet on my blog, but I probably will soon.
Mm-hmm.
When I've gone to the grocery store, ever since this crisis started, yes, there was no toilet paper. People were, buying bottled water. Why, I don't know. But the produce section was chock full.
I noticed that.
I could have
Yes.
loaded up an entire cart of nothing but fresh produce. So if you
Mm-hmm.
think about it, you go and you think, okay, my God, there's a crisis. I've got to get canned vegetables. And all of a sudden you see, oh, my choice is lima beans and canned spinach.
Right.
Well, if you know how to dehydrate food, if you know how to can food, then there is no limit to
Right.
what you can put away.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one thing that our grandparents and great grandparents, and then before them, finding ways where they could preserve food for a
Mm-hmm.
time when maybe there wasn't much of a harvest, maybe hunting was no good. For some reason, they couldn't get out of the house to farm and to hunt and grow things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they had that store, but it was food they had set aside themselves. So if someone's watching
Right.
this and maybe they're worried about food shortages, you know what? For right now, we're getting into prime gardening season. That's
Hmm.
another skill to pick up on. But if you can garden and dehydrate food and can different kinds of food, including canning meats,
Hmm.
then you won't have to worry so much about what is on the store shelves as far as food goes. So
Right.
those are just three skills that you
Yeah.
can learn. And again, maybe we've had cases here where someone's food storage was, flooded in, the floodwaters, and then it becomes unsafe to use, right?
Right.
But let's say you lose all your preps, as we call them. You lose your preps, but you know how to grow food. You know how to do a lot of things because you focus not just on stuff, which that's the easy part, frankly. You pull out a
Sure.
debit or credit card and man, you can get prepped quickly.
Yeah.
But rather than loading up on that, in addition to, you're learning new skills. And if you can teach those to your family members and your kids, you really are doing a favor to the next generation, for
Right.
the
And
next
I imagine too that if you have those skills that a lot of people don't have, that you now have currency as well
Absolutely.
in uncertain times. So
Hmm.
someone else learns one thing and you learn another thing, and you can barter those things and help each other. So any kind of skill
Exactly.
that you can learn is going to help you, not just with that specific thing, but with the other things that you may not know how to do.
Exactly. In
Yeah.
fact, I know of older people who they're getting into their, late 60s and in their 70s and older. And some of them have said, Lisa, if there was ever an emergency, I can't help, out in the fields, or I can't
Right.
help with physical labor.
Hmm.
And then they start listing everything they know how to do. And all of a sudden, you have incredible value.
Right.
And as you mentioned, it can also become, a way to earn money in
Hmm.
difficult times or just maybe in very good economic times.
Right. For sure. So, the one question I have to ask you is about the obvious one, the toilet paper.
All right.
Okay, so people are hoarding toilet paper, and as a prepper, you probably have a good supply already, and you're doing fine.
I love
But
toilet paper.
yeah, well, we all love it, right? Who wouldn't love it? But the thing is that people are panicking and buying it, and so I like to think about what's the worst case scenario if someone does run out of toilet paper. What is the worst thing that can happen, right? What are some people are buying bidets, and I've considered that, but I'm not a plumber and I'm a little worried about installing that myself. That's a skill that I should probably put on my
That's
list to
funny.
learn, right? So there's these different things that people could do, but what are they? So if somebody runs out of toilet paper, and first of all, how much do we really need to keep stored? What is a prudent reserve toilet paper? And then what are the alternatives if we run out? People are buying paper towels. I don't know if that's
Yeah, that's not good. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think
Paper
that's good.
towels and wipes, they can very easily clog up
Mm,
your pipe, your sewer system in your
mhm.
house, and now you have another big problem on your
Much
hands.
bigger problem. Yeah.
Couple of things. Number one, the United States just churns out massive amounts of toilet paper. We have huge plants up in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
All right, so that's number one.
It's
Number
not a
two,
shortage, it's just a
right,
distribution thing right
yes.
now.
And then
Distribution issue.
stores typically stock up at night.
Hmm.
So if you can get there, early, especially kind of like on an off day, like a Wednesday morning or something.
Right.
Um, and then another thing is if you have a local Facebook group, a
Hmm.
local forum, something like that. I mean, just this morning, someone posted on my local forum, hey, everybody, Costco has toilet paper and paper towels. And
Right.
so if you really are in dire need, you make a beeline for whatever store, and then you
Right.
just, hope that you get there. But yeah, over time, I mean, that's kind of a curve in itself. That's going to flatten over time.
Yeah.
But if you truly have nothing on hand, I'll tell you what my plan has been. Give you a couple options. You mentioned the bidet. And
Right.
for those of us that have had, babies, we know that, usually the hospitals send us home with a peri bottle. And
Yes. Right.
that is a
Hmm.
bottle you fill with water. It has like this angled spout, and you can just rinse, your underside, so to speak,
Yeah.
and, pat yourself dry. So that's another option.
Right.
And then another use, and there are a lot of people who use this just in their everyday lives, and that is just what they call cloth toilet paper.
Hmm.
And
Right.
that would just be cutting up, old t-shirts, so, fabric that is soft, but old t-shirts would be ideal. and then just keeping a stack of them, and then a bucket. So
Yeah.
a bucket with a lid. And my plan, if we resort to that, is, I will use those for pee,
Mhm.
and I'm going to tell the women in the one woman, my daughter who's 20,
Yeah.
we'll just use those and then put them in the bucket with a lid, so if
Mhm.
there's any smell, it's kept inside.
Yeah.
And then we'll use their, toilet paper for number 2. That's
Right.
my plan.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure, though, that if you do use cloth toilet paper, a couple of things. Some families who are really into this, I mean, this is all they ever buy. They'll
Right.
have a stack of toilet paper, the cloth wipes for every member of the family. So yours are laundered separately from everybody else's.
Mhm.
And then you got to make sure that you launder them correctly, because if you think about it, it's kind of like using cloth
Cloth
diapers.
diapers, yeah, which is a science. I
Yeah.
meant to do that, and I bought the diapers and I had it all ready, and I never did it. It was just
Yes.
so complicated. So I ended up not doing it, but I was ready. I was ready for it.
Yes. And then you want to make sure that your washing machine is set at the very hottest possible, temperature, and you're using your soap and maybe even, however much, half a cup of bleach or whatever. So you
Right.
want to make sure that you have that sanitation process.
Mm.
I would categorize that as probably, kind of at the one far end of a worst case scenario as far
Yeah.
as running out of toilet paper goes.
So my mom was threatening or planning
Mhm.
that if she runs out of toilet paper, she'll just use her bag of unmatched socks. Is that a good idea?
They're
I don't.
soft.
Yeah. Well, some of them are. Some of them are wool. I don't know.
Uh,
So you might want to be
that's
more
funny.
careful about the materials you're
Well, you
selecting.
know what? She's thinking creatively,
Yes, she is.
accept and adapt. And so
Yes.
that's a good
Yep.
thing.
That
Yeah.
is a great rule to live by. And I was thinking too, if you don't have a peri bottle, if you've never had a baby or you long since threw that away, what about using like a sterilized ketchup bottle or something, like an old ketchup, anything that you can squirt,
Yep.
water out of. So
Yep.
get inventive. Think about what is it that you do have in your house that you could maybe use. Mustard container. It sounds silly, but we have these things maybe in our house that we might need that bottle more than we need the mustard right now. Put the mustard in something else and scoop it out with a knife, right?
That's
You
funny. Yeah.
have an option. There's always options.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's good. Something else to just kind of a word to the wise. Another product to stock up on is, in fact, 2 categories. And if I overlook the second one, I want you to remind me. But
Okay.
one is products for cleaning and disinfecting, and the
Mhm.
second category, Emily, is medications and remedies. So let
Right.
me talk about disinfectants right now.
Yeah.
Um, we're used to name brands like Clorox, Lysol, Purell. And right now, what I can tell you is that Purell, as it's being manufactured as fast as they possibly can,
Mhm.
it is going solely to the medical field,
They need it the
solely to
most
hospitals,
right now.
solely to,
Mhm.
a certain category that is not just your general consumers. And
Right.
that's why we saw a run on things like aloe vera, gel, and alcohol, because you can use that as a combination to make your own hand sanitizer.
Right.
But moving forward, there's a possibility. And right now, as I've been keeping up with the news, we are not seeing the overwhelm we thought would happen with hospitals. That's not to say there aren't outbreaks in different parts of the country, because we
Mhm.
know there are. But it is possible that over time, let me move my little thing. That lamp looks kind of funky, just isolated there. But over time, maybe even brands like Clorox and Lysol may be sending the bulk of their products, instead of to grocery stores and, just as a general consumer category,
Mhm.
to those medical facilities, because
Right.
truly they are in more need of those than we are.
Sure
So if
are.
someone was going to start stocking up, I would say buy an extra 6 months or so when you see products like those that are disinfectants,
Mhm.
not just cleaners. So that is 2 different categories. So
We're
you want
talking
to,
about in general times, though, right? I mean, like right
well, you know
now,
what?
we don't want people all going out and buying
Right.
6 months supply of
Well, like,
disinfectants.
yeah,
When
well, like right
yeah.
now, what we're hearing from the White House task force that has
Mhm.
a daily press briefing, we're hearing that they're thinking there's likely to be outbreaks again in the fall.
Yeah.
It's unpredictable. We don't know what kind of treatments or cures, may come between now and then, because that's down the road.
Sure. Yeah.
But if that does happen, then you might see some of those, name brands that we just have used for years. You
Hmm.
might see that those also are being just steered in the direction of medical facilities and so
Right.
on. So
Yeah.
I would say if you're going to be buying some Clorox wipes, for example, maybe buy 4 of them, just to have on hand.
Yeah.
And same with Lysol and so on, because you're not going to see Purell, brand name Purell, in the stores unless there's a stash somewhere that hasn't been bought out. You may not see that for a while.
Right.
Then the second point of that is do some research online and learn to make your own disinfectants.
Hmm.
So they may not be, scientifically lab proven to kill MRSA or SARS, but if you're using and looking at things like alcohol-based cleaners and disinfectants, bleach-based cleaners and disinfectants, know how to use those, know how to mix up the solutions. And in some cases, you may need to use gloves,
Hmm.
when you're
Yeah.
using them. Some things may be safe in food prep areas like your kitchen, others may not. But that would be just kind of a word to the wise there to kind of
Yeah,
keep in
it's a
mind.
really good idea to remember to check on those things for safety because, especially bleach mixed with certain things can be deadly.
Right.
So I remember my days when I worked in a group home, we made up a bleach solution 10 to
Yes.
1. So with water, mixed with water. And I can't remember the expiration date on that, but we had to remix it maybe every 10 days or 14 days. I can't remember. So that's something I need to look up. But you can make that solution in a spray bottle,
Mhm.
a clean spray bottle. So you're not mixing it with something that shouldn't be mixed with. But just making sure that you're being safe with how you're using different things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just,
Mhm.
between that and then the other category I was going to mention were like over-the-counter medications
Mhm.
and natural remedies, alternative medicine. We use both in our home, but
Mhm.
I would also suggest knowing what we know about this particular virus, and
Right.
it shares symptoms with a lot of other bugs out there. But we know for sure, now we know that it can cause diarrhea in about half of the cases,
Mm.
and you have upper respiratory stuff, have a cough, difficulty breathing. I have read cases that where people report that their body aches were
Mhm.
just extreme, they were extremely painful. So
Mm.
then just kind of go through that checklist mentally and do a survey of what you already have.
Right.
And my daughter, we believe she had this bug back in the 1st of January.
Mm.
She was up at college. She called us a few times, terrified because she couldn't breathe.
Wow.
That was scary.
Wow.
And so she tested negative for the flu, which would make sense if
Mhm.
she had contracted the COVID-19.
Yeah.
And we were telling her things like getting, Vicks Vapor Rub, put it on your chest, to see if that maybe kind of relieves some of that stress and the breathing
Mhm.
situation. Go sit in a hot shower, get some eucalyptus essential oil going in a
Sure.
diffuser.
Yeah.
And we, as her parents, 3 hours away, we were kind of worried.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, but if you have those kinds of things on hand now, then you'll be ready for, any kind of bug that comes along. But I would highly recommend thinking about what your family already uses when you
Mhm.
have those symptoms, and then make sure you have a supply of those. We know that this virus typically would last maybe 14 to 21 days.
Right.
So whatever you stock up on, you want to make sure, what if 2 of us in the family get it? And
Right.
I have Mucinex. All right,
Mhm.
well, how many, doses of Mucinex might I use, let's say for maybe 7 or 8 or 9 of those days?
Mhm.
And then just do a little bit of math to figure out what you'll need. But
Right.
that would be a really good thing to stock up on and have available, because if you're the one who gets sick,
Mhm.
you want to have those things on hand right then and there.
Sure. Yeah. And really, I like how you're paying attention to what the symptoms are and what you might need to treat those. And one thing that I've been hearing is ibuprofen is not safe in this virus. So um, that's something that normally people would say, yeah, because you mentioned the body aches. So that's our natural go-to for body aches. But that's not the thing to take during this. So
Mhm.
finding alternatives to that. Um, well, Tylenol, I've heard, is the best alternative. But normally, if you have a high fever, the doctor will tell you to switch between the two. This is not the time to do that. And I'm not a medical doctor, so
Right.
do your own research. Neither of us are, but do your own research. But just pay attention to what is being said and be real careful about what you're using,
Yes.
because even if it worked for something else, you should be checking to see if it's safe in this instance.
And
Yeah.
this is a novel virus. We
Hmm.
found out, what, 2 or 3 months ago when the news first began to hit from China, they used the term novel virus again and again
Hmm.
because it was a totally new virus. No
Right.
one knew anything about it.
Hmm.
The doctors in China, many of them were dying from it, and the nurses as well. And what is it about this virus? And the good news is that it no longer is quite so novel.
Hmm.
So
Yes.
it took the world by storm, and it hid, behind, a lot of mysterious symptoms and a lot of mysterious, components of it. I mean, even in a
Hmm.
lab, for a long time here in the United States, we didn't even, weren't able to even replicate and grow that virus for a long
Mm.
time.
Right.
So that's important to be able to do if you're going to come up with different
And
treatments,
test it.
cures, the
Right.
vaccine, and so on.
Hmm.
But it's not so unknown anymore.
Right.
And I would recommend people just continue to stay up to date
Hmm.
because there could be, maybe treatments and even simple things that we can do at home. And one thing I didn't mention, and you mentioned having a fever, I would recommend having one or more thermometers on hand. So,
Yes.
with this virus, and we know that it can survive for long periods of time on different types of
Hmm.
surfaces. But if have a thermometer and you're using it for the whole family, you may unwittingly pass it on to someone else if there is someone who has, contracted the virus. So you may
Right.
want to have, a thermometer that maybe as you can buy an extra, maybe one for each family member, or at
Right.
least an extra 2 or 3, so you can make sure they're fully disinfected before you use them again.
Right. And make sure you're disinfecting them between uses with alcohol wipes that often come in a first aid kit. So
Right.
you may, maybe not for everyday sanitizing, but for something like that, you may have some of those somewhere that you forgot about. So um, making sure you're cleaning things properly in between. Yeah. Hmm. These are all great tips. Yeah. So are there anything else? I know we had some other things we were going to talk about here. Just the one thing is just the panic and the fear. I know that was something we talked about ahead of time of how can we, and basically what I'm hearing from you through our whole conversation is just preparing and being ready for something. Then there's really, what is there to fear when you're ready for anything?
It's been really interesting. And I can tell you, just going back about 2.5 years with Hurricane Harvey, um, I had never lived through a hurricane. My husband had lived through many of them when he
Mm.
lived out in the South Pacific, but I had never really lived through one. And so, however, as a family, we were prepared. I had probably 3 months worth of food. We had our Berkey water purifier. We had stored water. We really had a lot of um, had taken a lot of measures if we had a power outage and so on. So we were ready. But as it got closer and people were scrambling to get to the gas station and the bank and the grocery stores, and
Mm.
I mean, I had to leave. I had to go to the grocery store just to see for myself. And it
Right.
was true. It
Yeah.
really was true. But personally, at a personal level, I I didn't feel any, as a reflex, I didn't feel any panic or fear.
Hmm.
It was very surreal when I would think, I don't have anything I have to buy. I ended up buying
Right.
2 or 3 gallons of ice cream. I was like, well, that sounds kind of good.
That's one thing I don't have at all in the
Right,
freezer, and my son
right.
is pretty sad about it.
And
Yeah.
but it is a kind of a surreal feeling where you start questioning yourself. I've forgotten something. Okay,
Mhm.
what do I need? Now,
Right.
right now, it's a prime time for everybody, prepper or not, everybody,
Mhm.
to keep track of what it is that you're running out of.
Mhm.
What did you forget to have on hand? Because as well prepared, I think, as our family is and has been, last week, or maybe it was even Monday, my husband said, at least we only have 2 tall trash bags left.
Oh boy.
And we could have made do with, just something,
Yeah.
but it was like, oh, I didn't
Time to
even
buy
really
those.
think to stock up on. And maybe years
Yeah.
ago when I first started prepping, and maybe I did have extras, but we just buy the big old box with, like, I don't even know, 50, or it lasts a long time, and then all of a sudden,
Right.
boom, you're down to the last one. So right now, just maybe have a pad of paper, post a piece of paper somewhere, like in your kitchen, and as you run out of things, or as you realize, oh, We totally forgot to have this on hand. Then
Right.
make a list. And what you're doing is you're kind of just becoming prepared for the next scenario, whatever that crisis is, a big winter storm, or,
Hmm.
a time when the whole entire family comes down with a flu bug.
Yeah.
Um, that will really help you. In kind of prepping circles, we say fill in the gaps. What are the
Hmm.
gaps in my preps? And really, until you're tested, and every single household in America and really around the world, we're being tested in a way.
We
What
are.
are your gaps? If there was some kind of a power outage, or if there was a shortage of some kind of food, some kind of medication, those all can become gaps. And right now, tracking them would be a very, very good way of knowing what to do to prepare for the next time around.
Yeah, it'd be great to even have a running inventory. I know I do a lot of the grocery shopping for my mom, and we use Google Keep on our
Yes,
phones. So she has a list of all the things that she usually needs for me to get for her. And then she just unchecks the boxes, which becomes a list on my phone. And as I pick things up in the store, I check the boxes. They go back into the other list.
I love
So we
that.
just go back and forth.
Yeah.
And so she doesn't have to remember everything or write it out every time.
Mhm.
She just has a running list that she can look through, and it reminds her what she might need.
Yes.
So we can all do that and maybe have different categories, or if you want to do if you're a person that likes spreadsheets, do a spreadsheet or a checklist
Yes.
somewhere, write it or type it or whatever works for
Yeah.
you, but have something where you think about all the things your household needs and that can help remind you if you're low on something.
A lot of times we think about food and we focus on it, but it's also track the things that you consume every day or week or month.
Right.
And everyone zeroed in on toilet paper. One interesting explanation for that, someone said, if a rumor went around that there was no canned tuna, no one would panic. But as
Right.
soon as they started hearing pandemic, quarantines, shelter in place,
Yeah.
the toilet paper was something where, by buying a whole bunch of that, we have control over that. And it elicits maybe something in our primitive brain where we don't even want, we can deal with a lack of tuna. We can deal with
Right.
a shortage of, Granny Smith apples, but don't
Yeah.
tell me that there is no toilet paper. But I did want to address the food that you mentioned. You do the
Hmm.
grocery shopping. And one thing to consider, in addition to just buying the groceries, is to start thinking, what meals could I plan for, and
Right.
snacks even, that if one of the adults, or the mom and the dad, or whoever the adults are in the household, especially with their children, what
Hmm.
if you're the one that gets sick? So if you've stocked up on a lot of ingredients and you have a long list of recipes that you love, but then you get sick and your young children
Mm.
then really have to start thinking, well, what are we going to snack on? You don't want them, standing on a chair over, a hot, uh,
Yeah. Who's
hot
cooking?
stove, right?
Yeah. Right.
But what could you freeze? What could you put in the freezer? What are some really easy, to grab and eat snacks that you're going to set aside
Hmm.
just for that kind of a scenario? So, my kids are older, but when they were younger, I did stock up on things like canned ravioli
Sure.
and, some convenient foods, because I was thinking, if the time comes, at least they can eat. And
So that they can be
also,
self-sufficient.
yes, and I
Yeah.
taught them at an early age how to make the ramen in the microwave and how to make macaroni and cheese in the microwave.
I'm
So
definitely learning the
those are
gaps
easy.
of what my son doesn't know. So
Interesting.
I'm starting to see things that maybe I should have taught him before. You know,
Yeah,
as simple as he's 9.5, and I thought I'm not going to take him to the grocery store, and I'm pretty set for a little while, but eventually I'm going to need to go to the grocery store. So he's never been home alone. So we're starting to practice, what do you do if you're home alone?
mhm,
And so getting him used to using the phone, which he never has to use the home phone. He uses my cell phone most of the time.
right.
So
Yeah,
practicing certain like basic skills like that I didn't think were that important because he didn't really need them yet. And so really kind of preparing him for those things. And I think he would be fine on his own for an hour at home, doors locked and phone at the ready. You know, he'll be
right,
fine.
right.
But at the same time, I want to make sure he feels confident that way. So doing some of those things. So I'm starting to see some of the things that I didn't really think, I just do things that I just do that I need to make sure he knows how to do. So
Yeah, and on my blog, thesurvivalmom.com. If you go there and do a search for skills or do a search for kid skills or maybe that
Nice.
kind of
Yeah.
combination, skills for kids, I have lists. I have 4 or 5 lists there of skills in different categories.
Mm-hmm.
And not only would they be helpful to kind of go through a checklist. Hey, do they know how to, use a microwave? Do they know how to use a can opener? Do they know
Right.
how to, make certain kinds of recipes or follow a very simple recipe?
Yeah.
But skills in a lot of different categories. And they might also give parents whose kids are kind of being homeschooled now,
Mm-hmm.
they might give them an idea of what else could we do to creatively use the time. They're learning lifetime skills, okay?
Yeah.
But it's going to alleviate boredom, and the skills may very well come in handy for the entire family. But
Much more fun than a math worksheet, maybe, to
yeah.
do something real life. You're still doing math, you're
Yes.
measuring to cook and the
Uh-huh.
different things that you're going to be teaching them and giving them things that will carry through the rest of their lives.
Yep.
So,
Very useful.
yeah, that's great. Well, you've given us some great tips, Lisa. Is there anything else you want to tell us as your words of wisdom?
I guess I would want everyone to remember that this is temporary.
Mm.
Yes, it is a tough time. It is temporary. And, again, going back to generations before us, we have so many modern day conveniences.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us are able to, depending on kind of the status, some people who are in very strict lockdown scenarios, others are just in recommended shelter in place and so
Mm-hmm.
on. But we have conveniences that make our lives so comfortable and physically comfortable. We have electricity, we have, clean water when we turn on the tap.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it is a stressful time, there's a lot of unknown here, a lot of unknown.
Yes.
A lot of us knew how to prepare for a hurricane. We knew how to prepare for a flood, a winter storm and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But, there hasn't been a whole lot of information out there prior to this about preparing for a pandemic. And
Right.
just the word alone is scary.
Mm-hmm.
But remember that it's temporary. We have modern day conveniences that do make things, even in this scenario, a lot easier for us. And also, it's been comforting to me as I've been keeping up on what is going on in just the medical research and the technological research worlds. What they're doing nonstop is impressive. They're discovering
Mm-hmm.
things every day about the disease,
Yeah.
and things that whatever, however this happened in China, well, our researchers are just light years ahead of that. It really is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and one thing that is exciting is that I fully expect that as these researchers and doctors and so on around the world, this is the first time in human history
Mm-hmm.
that the smartest minds in the entire world, brilliant people, are all focused on finding the same answer.
That's really amazing,
It
isn't it?
is amazing. And
Yeah.
I really expect that as we move forward, they're going to be finding cures and treatments and solutions to problems that maybe we thought were incurable.
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't a time to just be filled with despair. And you are going to have to watch your own mental and emotional health, because that's
Mm-hmm.
a biggie. When I mentioned earlier, accept and adapt, I really meant it.
Right.
Accept this. It is a temporary lifestyle change. We
Mm-hmm.
do have to be cautious and we do have to take safeguards, but there is an end in sight. So that is just what I would leave people with, is that it's scary, it's uncertain,
Mm-hmm.
but it also, we may very well be closer to the end of this than we realize.
Right. Yeah. That's really great reminder that this is not going to go on forever. And I love the thought of the whole world focused on one thing. I mean, how many
Mhm.
things in history we talk about, um, generations before us that had adversity, like World War II, for instance, where
Mhm.
people are against each other. We're all in this together and we're all searching for a solution and wanting the whole world to be healthy.
Yeah,
So lots of good coming out of this at the end of it. So
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for including me, Emily. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed our talk.
So
Thanks.
glad we did this, Lisa. Can you remind us again where people can find you?
Yeah. Well, I would highly recommend, and not just because my mother loves it, but my book, It really is a family survival manual, and it's written in a very, very friendly tone.
Mm,
There is nothing hardcore survivalist about it. You know, someone is a little bit wary of that. But the title of the book is Survival Mom: How to Prepare Your Family for Everyday Disasters and Worst Case Scenarios. And
mm,
you can check it out at the library, but you'll also, if you want your own copy, which I would recommend, it is on Amazon. And my website, the blog, the main blog is thesurvivalmom.com. And I do
right.
have a monthly membership where I provide
Mm,
multiple group calls every month. We have a brand new mentoring program for people who, they wish they were prepared. They're a little bit prepared.
mhm.
They just want one-on-one support of groups of like 2 and 3 people. And they will be teamed up with an actual prepper coach within the membership.
Nice.
And the membership is called survivalmomsisterhood.com. And for right now, for the time being, registration is open.
Wow. Great. Well, thank you so much, Lisa,
You're welcome.
and wonderful talking to you.
Same here, Emily.
All
Thanks.
right. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.